Okay, so Working Genius. What is the Working Genius? If you haven't heard of it or read about it yet, it's really just a simple and really practical tool to help identify the God-given gifts and talents that you have that you would bring to your work and also to teams that you work on and work with. So I found this tool really helpful over the last 3 years as I've used it and researched it and trained people in it. Because it speaks to the reality that there's some parts of our day-to-day work and ministry life that are really refreshing, that actually, like, when I do them, they bring energy and joy to my life, and I feel more energized when I finish it. And then there's other things that I do where I don't feel like I'm actually that good at it, and I'm really drained. And it's like I take a step back and I have to take a nap or pull away, go on a walk. And for all of us, we have to do things we're not as good at times, and we can do hard things and push through. But an ideal situation is for a majority of your time to be spent on things that you're both good at and that are life-giving or in an area of passion. So this tool, specifically Working Genius, was created, I think 2.5 or 3 years ago by Pat Lencioni and his team. And it breaks work and teamwork into 6 different categories using the acronym WIDGET, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So you could think of the term genius. It's maybe it sounds strange to be using it in that way. Like, I have a genius. What does that mean? Another word you could use is talents. These are almost like God-given talents or geniuses, as we'll use. And each of the 6 categories are incredibly essential and needed to take like a project all the way from brainstorming stage to implementation. And as we talk about it more, you'll begin to see a lot of times with teams or even in individual work, we skip some of these stages. We go straight from like, I have an idea to I'm going to execute the idea. And it doesn't actually work. People don't get bought in. You realize that wasn't maybe the best idea. And you're sitting there by yourself like, what just happened? Why do I keep doing the same things and they don't work? This could be some helpful language to figure out, I'm good at this part of the process. I need some help from other people that can come alongside me. So a couple things before we go into the 6 categories. Why does this tool matter? Why is it helpful? I think it helps teams get a lot more done and actually have fun getting things done. We've used this on our campus executive team a lot as we delegate projects and put kind of sub teams together and make sure we have different strengths or talents or geniuses on each team. It also helps with teammates and how you view people. It can help with not passing judgment on others and gives language to, oh, this may be an area of frustration or weakness for them. Whereas for me, it's a strength that comes natural and I can have empathy and care. And also this part is a weakness for me. They're really strong and I have common language with my teammates and say, hey, could you come help me with this? And they actually might enjoy it, that's just like the win, is when my weakness pairs with like JJ's genius and he loves it. It's like, let's go, let's work, let's get after it together. It's really fun. And then like personally, it helps you not feel guilty about those areas that are like, I'm not very good at it and it doesn't bring me joy or energy. Okay, so Working Genius. We're going to use 3 different terms. We're going to use the term genius and competency and frustration. Those are, when you think of those 6 categories, each person is going to have two categories in each. So everyone will have 2 geniuses. We mentioned this already. These are areas of joy or passion or strength for you, something that's really natural. So I like to use the analogy of like I don't have one with me, but like a Yeti mug, or like my insulated water bottle. There you go. JJ's got one. If you pour a hot cup of coffee into that Yeti mug, it's going to stay hot for hours, ideally, right? At least through the morning. You're going to drink it like 2-3 hours later, and it's like, ooh, that's still hot. That's like your genius. When you do it for an extended period of time, it stays hot and the passion runs high. Competency is the second area. These are things that you might have some strength and be a little bit good at it. You have experience in it, but it's probably not as life-giving as a genius. It doesn't spark joy in your life. So this would be like a coffee mug. You pour in the coffee. It's going to be hot for a little bit. There's a little bit of containment of that heat, but over time, it's really going to drain out and you're going to lose some of that heat and joy. So that's second category. Third would be your working frustrations. Everyone has 2 of these as well. The analogy for that would be like a paper coffee cup, and you poke a hole in the bottom. So you pour that coffee into the cup, and it's not going to stay hot more than like 20 minutes at most. And the coffee actually drains out the bottom through that hole. So it's things that are draining. You're probably not good at it, and it doesn't bring you joy and energy. Everyone's got two geniuses, 2 competencies in the middle, and then 2 frustrations. All right, I'm going to throw up a graphic here. There's a lot, if you just Google working genius, a lot of different things you can see, but this is one I like to use a lot. It's pretty easy to read and understand. So I'm going to briefly walk through each of the 6, and then I'll pause if Randy and John want to offer any insight from their perspective, or we can pause for questions too. So you see the 6 areas with the acronym widget, and I'll just comment on each real briefly. We'll start with the genius of wonder. This is at the very beginning stage of a project or work when you're kind of in that brainstorming mode. So the genius of wonder, as it says, is it's the gift or talent of pondering possibilities and greater potential or opportunities in a given situation. People with wonder, they often see need for change or need for improvement when they enter a team or a project. They'll often use language like, I wonder if, blank. That's wonder. Second, you see the widget has gears. So one part moves to the next in the 6 stages, but also in the gears as they turn. So number 2 is invention. This is also in that, as you see in the bottom, the ideation zone or brainstorming. This is the natural gift of creating original and novel ideas or solutions. People with invention, they work with a wonder gift, the wonder genius, and they say that question is important. Here's some potential solutions of how we could solve that problem. Wonder like points out problems. Invention helps to create solutions. So both are really needed. They say that's a really important question. Here's some ideas of how we could get that done. Third, we're going to move to discernment. Discernment begins to go into the second zone of work. You see at the bottom, it's called activation. This is where ideas start to take some life. And discernment is the natural gift of intuitively and instinctively evaluating ideas. So they take that invention of like, we could do this or this or this with that problem we're trying to solve. And discernment says, I hear what you're saying, but I really think this is the one that's going to help us solve the problem. It's people that are like very intuitive, and they can pare down lots of ideas to create or choose the best one and how it helps solve that problem. Fourth is galvanizing. This really fits with that activation zone of work. It's the genius of rallying and inspiring and organizing people to take action. So it's the discernment person says, I really think this is the best idea that will help us solve the problem. The galvanizer says, let's rally some people to go do it. They're going to bring lots of energy and capacity to solve that problem and really are needed in this process. Often this is one that's missed with teams that are trying to brainstorm, is they have a great idea and they go and do it, but they forget we actually need to rally people behind us, whether it's in a large organization or even in your direct team or your region. You need a galvanizer to help get people behind what you're doing. Let's go to the fifth one, enablement. This is the natural gift of providing encouragement and assistance for an idea or project. Often this is the word choice of enablement is confusing for people. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But really, this is someone that may have some gifting and coaching and encouragement, and they pair with the galvanizer that rallies people. The enablement person puts an arm around side and says, how can I help you achieve your goals? Or they might be someone that raises a hand and said, I'd love to help. So galvanizers love working with people with enablement because they are willing to rally behind that idea and then provide assistance and lift and coaching. It's such an important part of the process, enablement. And then the sixth and last one is tenacity. Natural gift of pushing projects or tasks to completion and achieving results. These are people that are like, they care so much about finishing. They want to cross things off the list. They want to make sure that everything is taken care of and is seen through to the end, and that we've reached our desired result. This one's pretty easy to understand in some ways, and there's might be someone that comes to your mind in your family or in your life that has some tenacity, and it's really helpful on a team. So those are the 6 types of working genius, and at the bottom, the 3 zones of work, and where those fit together. And the last thing I'll share before I pause for questions or comments is as you think about where you might be within these 6, your 2 geniuses, and maybe people on your team, a good question to ask yourself is, does this area bring me joy? For example, if you think, I know I've got discernment's for sure one of mine, but I'm wondering if enablement or tenacity is my second genius. I'm good at both. I kind of like doing both. A good follow-up question would be, does that bring me joy when I do it for an extended period of time? Even if you're really good at something, but it doesn't bring you joy, it's probably not one of your geniuses. It's more likely in the competency zone. So is this something I love doing and it's natural and it brings me energy? That's probably a genius. For me, when I first saw this tool, a huge clarifying part for me was in the galvanizing and enablement categories. I realized in the role I had been in the previous 7 or 8 years, my role needed me to do a lot of galvanizing and enablement work. But I thought about where I was at with my energy at the end of a school year, and I'd be so drained after that time, even though I became pretty good at rallying people, recruiting, getting people moving towards a goal, and then coaching and encouragement with enablement. I realized I actually don't love doing those things for an extended period of time. Even though people would say, oh yeah, Luke's good at that, it didn't bring me a lot of joy in life. And for me, I realized more of what I love doing is in the wonder. I love kind of sitting back and looking at what are the problems that need to be solved, what are the possibilities and opportunities, and I could do that for hours or days and feel really good about it. Whereas for someone else, they were like, I can talk for 10 minutes and then I need to take a nap. So everyone is a little different, but everyone's got 2 geniuses. So let me pause. That's a lot of initial information. But before we go into JJ's assessment, Randy or John, any comments from you guys or things that have kind of been sticking out and how this has played out in your life?
Yeah, I would say it's just helpful to have some vocabulary to these things. And my genius is enablement and tenacity. And I always like kind of tying the ribbon on projects. And I love doing that, seeing something to completion. But I would have known how to kind of verbalize that. And then even my frustrations. It's just nice to have words and to understand I don't have to be good at all six of these. All six of these probably shouldn't be life-giving or I'd be exhausted. But so yeah, that's one of the most helpful things for me as I'm learning more and more about this.
Thanks, Randy. Anything for you, John?
Yeah, it's just been really helpful for me to think through closer relationships that I have, whether it's team, regional team itself. I'd love for my regional team to do this so I can more effectively plan things, or even just putting teams together within my region for certain projects. I think this could be really helpful. I was actually just thinking it through from the perspective of how my wife and I work together in marriage. And then there's also from a peer level, my peer regional directors. I've on the short list want to reach out to some of the guys that and ladies who are regional directors who have strengths in the areas that are frustration for me. Just to really get some help and input into maybe ways that I could lead in the region using other people's strengths.
That's good. Thanks, Jim. Love that. JJ, before we do your breakdown, any questions on what was shared so far, or clarity that you need, what you heard?
Yeah, no questions or clarity right now. Really appreciate this resource, and I actually really excited that focuses on what's life-giving compared to what you're good at, because it's kind of hard to separate the two. So yeah, I'm eager to hear more of my profile.
Yeah. Think about this isn't me, but if there was someone, if I've been on teams in the past, someone that is really good at operational work, let's say they have a strong tenacity gift set. And so that person, and especially in our organization, can get pegged pretty quickly as like the admin, the ops person. Well, they should do the spreadsheet and track and finance. But what if that person doesn't see that as life-giving and energizing, and they say, I can do that, I'm willing, I can serve, but I don't want to be in a role where that's primarily what I'm doing. I really like enablement. I like coaching and bringing support and encouragement to people. Just having that language can normalize strengths and weaknesses in a helpful way. So this next part, we'll talk about JJ's results. We'll go a little bit quickly, and then we'll talk about one of the teams you're on, the NCT, and kind of how your assessment fits with the rest of the team. And we'll go from there. So let me pull up JJ's assessment. All right, so here's JJ's results. I'm gonna do some description here, JJ. There's stuff on the sheet already, but I want you to think about this question as you're reading through it and listening. The assessment gives you, your 2 in each category, but my question for you is, do you agree? That's another thing I like about the tool is there's flexibility to change it. I think even in the packet, there might be a question about that. Do you want to move your assessment? And there's been a few people I've done this with that through getting descriptions and then talking with people that work with them, they've had one of their geniuses and competencies flip. And it's like, just kind of figure out what works for you. It might be accurate, but it might not be. Probably the frustrations are accurate in my experience, but there might be a genius or competency that needs to switch. And so we can talk about that. But as you're listening, just think about, do I agree with what it's saying? And we'll come back to that at the end. So JJ, his working genius results are enablement and galvanizing. So it says enablement, naturally gifted at and derive energy and joy from providing others with encouragement and assistance for projects and tasks. These are people that love just answering the call to provide others with that support that they need. It could be in like a personal or life situation or in their work. It could be even in your family. Again, I think of like raising the hand, our enablement people, like, I would love to help, I can do that. And then the arm alongside, coaching, support, encouragement are often people with enablement, and that it's really life-giving for them. These are like glue people on a team often. You don't know what you're missing until they're gone. And it's like, what are we doing? How are we going to get things done? We're missing something. And it's often a lack of enablement or someone not living into their enablement. So your second working genius is galvanizing. These are people that get energy and joy and are skilled at rallying people, inspiring them to take action around ideas, projects, or tasks. Something to note with this pairing, we'll talk about in a little bit, is galvanizing leads to enablement in the, I guess, chronologically or how it's synced up on the widget. That can be helpful for people. It can be hard because you have a big scope of what you're missing as well in the 6, but it's just something to take note of, that galvanizing and enablement go back to back. So yeah, rallying, motivating, they get energy even from persuading people or like having some woo, maybe getting people to take action. Maybe it's galvanizing them to rethink a posture they had or a way of operating in the world or doing ministry, or to change their plans. So that's galvanizing and enablement are your 2 geniuses. And I'll go a little more quickly on the competencies. The assessment says discernment and invention. Discernment and invention. So don't mind using your intuition and instincts to evaluate and assess ideas or plans. You might even be someone that people go to. Like, could you help me think through this problem? Or I'm wondering about going on vacation to this place, or this place. What do you think, JJ? And having some skill to like pare that down. And then invention, you're capable of and don't mind creating original and novel ideas or solutions. Coming up with some of those ideas yourself to solve problems. And then lastly, your working frustrations are tenacity and wonder. So think of that widget, wonder at the very beginning and tenacity at the very end is what it says are your working frustrations. So tenacity is really about getting things done and getting things to the execution and implementation, achieving results, and people that get a lot of energy even from checking things off the list. This is also in my frustration. And I think we have 2 others on the call who it's in their genius. So we can talk about that, what it looks like for a frustration person and a genius. But these are also people, when they see an obstacle, they don't mind like just pushing through or figuring out a way to get it done. Whereas if it's in the frustration category, the obstacle might be a reason to just like opt out or delegate to someone else. And then wonder, you aren't naturally gifted at, don't derive energy and joy from pondering the possibility of greater potential and opportunity in a given situation. Sometimes on teams that are lacking in wonder, there's a tendency to kind of do things the same way every year because that's how we've always done things. And the wonder people come in and say, could we do this better? Is there a different way we could do it? The key with wonder is timing. Timing is really key. You can't ask a wondering question when it's time to implement. It has to be at the beginning of the process. So pause with that. There's more I could say, but I'll put it back to JJ here for a second, and then Randy and John, if you want to chime in too, feel free. But how does this sit with you, JJ? Do you agree as you hear those things with the assessment?
Yeah, I would say I strongly agree with this. I think this definitely speaks really true of me. Especially looking at like the working frustrations, like I think I always have a hard time being in like when leading teams or people of like actually making a final decision, you know, so that could be even kind of fits into there as well too. It's like I would rather encourage and support people and shepherd people to help so they can make the decision and encourage them in that. So I think this definitely represents me for sure. Yeah.
It's good. So John and Randy, I spoke to the wonder piece a little bit of what that looks like. Do you guys want to speak to tenacity? And just, you have that as a genius in both of your assessments. How does that play out for you guys to have a genius of tenacity?
I kind of mentioned this a little bit in my last statement. I don't like things untied. I want to tie up all the loose ends that I can. To have things kind of hanging over my head is a frustration for me. So I want to see things completed. Yeah, it's having that as a genius. I think helps me get things done. I like, I'm a box checker, so I like checking things off. That's how I see it played out.
Yep. JJ, how do you feel when loose ends are not tied up?
Yeah, I'm kind of like, well, this is where it's just like, I'm like, well, I guess it didn't like get tied up, so it didn't work out well. So we need to think about something else. So I'm okay with it being not fully
Comfortable with
finished.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I think it's like, since there's not a joy, it's like, why would I continue to pursue something like if it's not bringing joy, if that makes sense.
That's great. Let's go up to your geniuses here for a second. I know you're still a little newer to your current role, but you've been on staff for quite a while. So you could think about the RD role or being a team leader, wherever you want, but what do you think about in your ministry work life? What types of things do you do that fit into these categories, enablement and galvanizing? Where in your work do you get to use those the most, do you think?
Yeah, definitely in the RD role, and even as team leader too, but more of like a coaching relationship. You know, it's like I'm not really coming up with the ideas of what our LTLs are doing on campus. And it's like their vision, their calling, they're excited. So it's like I get to do a lot of fun things where it's like I get to encourage them and remind them how cool it is and how it connects to the vision of AIA as a whole. And then yeah, I've been asking like our LTLs, like, what do you need help in? Do you need finances, resources? Do you need prayer? You know, so I feel like they do match up what you mentioned earlier in the coaching part. So I definitely see enabling, galvanizing, even parts on the field and in my current role, RD role, kind of really matching up with these working geniuses. Yeah.
So Randy, John, and I think all three of us do not have galvanizing in the genius. It may be I think it's a competency for me. I don't know about you two, but if you were working on a team with JJ or pairing up with him on a project, how do you think his galvanizing could help you just in general with the gaps that you might have in your leadership?
I could see it playing out both for me personally that might need a little energy and spark and rally, but also as you think about pulling people in and thinking who else do we need to round out this team, and kind of bringing them on board to bring something to the next level. That's how I could see utilizing someone with this genius.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is like it brings a spark to the project where there can often be a loss of steam at that. It's in the middle of like getting things done, and the galvanizer just brings a lot of life and energy towards eventual completion. I even think about it's kind of a silly example, but when we were in Austin and we some people wanted to go to In-N-Out on the drive to San Antonio, and there were some that were just like, we need to do this, we got to do it, this is what needs to happen. And JJ, you were kind of like bringing energy to that idea. You didn't come up with the idea, I don't think, but you were kind of bringing some life and like, yeah, we could do that. And then as we got closer, you were kind of sharing your expertise with In-N-Out and types of things we could order and share as a group, and just like helping me as I was driving and trying to figure out how to make the order. It just, yeah, kind of a strange example, but I think it shows that these gifts play out in our families too, and just in relational life. Even thinking about going on a vacation, I've seen this play out. Like, how do you pick where you're going to go? Who's going to be there? What do you pack? These stages are needed just as much. Okay, I'm going to move to talk about the NCT for a few minutes. And so the Working Genius system allows you to put together what they call a team map. And so it takes JJ's categories and puts them on a map with all the members of the NCT, and it'll show you where we lay out. I will say this is a large team, and so most teams we work on will be probably more in the 5 to 10 people range, and it's a little easier to see where the strengths and the gaps are. But nonetheless, you'll kind of see who's similar to you and things like that. So let me pull this up. Okay. So the first couple pages are just listing members of the national campus team. And I won't spend much time on this part, but you can kind of see where people are in their 3 categories. And I may have missed some people too that are not in the system. So, but this is the team map. See if I can get it so we can see. There we go. So I'm just gonna like leave it there and let you take a look at it. And then I'm just gonna ask, what are your initial observations as you look at this map? If you need me to zoom in on anything, let me know. Take a look, and what are your initial observations as you look at the NCT map?
It's fairly balanced in terms of the amount of people with strengths in each, or a working genius. There's 5 or 6 in each one, other than Wonder.
Yep. Good. How about for the frustration categories?
It looks like the fewest frustrations are in the middle. the D and the G, the discernment and galvanizer, with only 1 in discernment and 3 in galvanizing.
Mhm.
We might have a bit of a challenge with ideation. You know, both of those top 2 categories, that's the most divided in terms of way more frustration versus people with geniuses.
Yep, it's a good observation.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, like, looking at the continuum of just like, as NCT, maybe there's more frustrations of creating new ideas and actually seeing the ideas come to an end. You know, it's funny how it's like we like being in the middle, but we don't like starting new things and seeing them come through, being finished.
Yep. I'll send this to you guys too, so you have a copy for after, but I actually did something a little different that I want to show you that gives an example of, for most teams that are like smaller, you're going to see bigger discrepancy in the categories. So I'm actually going to pull up a team map for the breakout group that you were on, JJ, on the NCT meeting, just for the RDs that were on there, which was you, Jason, and Steph. And I'm going to pull that up and get your observations about what you see. So here's the 3 of you: Jason, JJ, Steph, and then here's the map. So this is a little more normative for a typical, like a campus team, a regional team, area teams. So all 3 of you can chime in. What do you observe about this team map?
We like being in the moment, like what's going on right now. Let's not think about the future and how to, or even like think of new things. We're here. So,
Yeah. In the moment. Yep. What do you see, Randy and John?
Is it frustrating for discerners to have nothing to discern from the top coming down?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I would think if it was just those 3 working together all the time, perhaps it would be, let's stick with status quo, you know, let's not think about, like JJ said, let's not think about the future, let's not invent anything new. John, your question's really insightful about nothing kind of coming down to the discernment level.
I'm married to a discerner, and I've got a couple on my training and development team as well. And how it usually plays out is the discernment is dormant unless it's paired with a wonder invention person. So it is like, I'm just going to keep doing what I already believe in and what I think is best. And when someone comes to them and says, hey, I've got some ideas, I'd love to get your thoughts. It's just like, whoa, this thing comes to life in them that's like, I'd love to do that. But I don't know what the ideas are, but I could certainly help you think through what the best one might be. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about who some of those people are, but it's so needed. And yet in this map, you see there's not maybe there's competencies in wonder, like JJ, you have invention competency, I think. So that's good to know. It's just not listed on the sheet. So no wonder, invention, or tenacity in this area. Just kind of interesting to look. I know this isn't your main team, but just shows what a smaller team can look like. Okay. I'm gonna do one more thing before we give a little space for questions. When this framework first came out, it was a little hard to tell at times basically, I have these two geniuses and I know how to describe each one and what that looks like, but what does it look like when I put them together? How does that play out? Because if someone has wonder and discernment versus wonder and tenacity, that's going to play out differently in their life as geniuses. So I don't know, a year or so later, they came out with this tool called the Working Genius Pairings. And it kind of gives a description of what is that like when you put two together, and even what are some of the cautions for that person to be aware of with the blind spots they might have. So I put together a little sheet for the NCT that we'll look at quickly, and then we'll stand with some Q&A. Most of the people listed here are NCT. I added a few other names of people who've taken the assessment too that some of you may know. So called the Working Genius Pairings, and it says, note that your pairing will be nuanced by what your specific working competencies and frustrations are, making your pairing unique to you. So you see at the top, John and I have the same two geniuses, but our other four are a little bit different. And then you have a lot of other demographic, personality nuances for each person, obviously. So these are listed in order for the widget. It's not like order of priority or number of people who have it or anything like that. So wonder, invention, these are creative dreamers. When you put it together, you'll find them with a journal filled with a bunch of ideas they may never get to or implement. Can sometimes be in the clouds, and always asking, could we do this better? Is there untapped potential? Sometimes though, they can create chaos when they constantly come up with new ideas to share, and can kind of stop the process, especially if they're doing it at the tenacity stage when we just need to finish and get it done. We've got, so Sarah and Claire are contemplative counselors with wonder and discernment. Think about how you experience them or how you'd want to work with them. Thoughtful, wisdom, resident counselors. Like that's Claire. I think I've experienced Sarah that way too. There's a few that we're missing on the NCT, so I didn't list those. WT, that's an interesting one. The first and the last on the 6. Careful implementer. They like to get things done and are pretty cautious, deep thinkers, live at 50,000 feet, but also 5 feet. They can feel conflicted and torn, being opposite ends of the spectrum. Kind of interesting. We don't have an ID. We got a couple IGs. Evangelizing innovators. They love to get people excited. They invent and then they get people to activate on it. Born salespeople. So JJ, think about Matt on our campus visit when we went to the HBCU and how he was interacting with the coaches, and he just like started going, and we're all kind of watching. And Meredith was similar too in how she went. They immediately get energy and momentum around ideas. Sometimes though can be hasty and too quick. They need discernment. Think about I and G, they need a discerner. Adaptable designer, this is Marcia, who's our admin. And oh, you don't like that one, I'll tweak it for you. So they have that invention, but also enablement. Nick is methodical architect, analytical, works hard, has great ideas and knows how to implement them. They have a lot of ideas they've already finished. So it's like, I can come up with it and I know how to get it done. But life can be black and white and overly wedded to the way things are getting done. Nuance and flexibility not at the top of the list. D and G are intuitive activators. Jason, Karen, and Joni have a good sense of what's good in the process. Their gut is usually right. They might say, hey, I don't think we need to spend more time on this. Let's get going. Let's get moving. But sometimes in brainstorming, they can ask, what are we gonna do? They want to go and move on from the brainstorming. Okay, we have a bunch of DEs or EDs, insightful collaborators. Mike and his wife, Kim, are this, Steph and Jay. When someone comes to them with an idea, they might say, I really want to help you, but before I do, let me give some thoughts to make sure this is actually what you need. So their enablement like draws them in to want to help, but the discernment says, give me a minute to actually think about it. This is the best way to use my time. And they don't really like to push back, so they probably will do some of that discernment on their own or with other people instead of you. DT, this is Steve and my wife, Christina, judicious accomplisher. They have good discernment and like to get stuff done, more so getting the right things done and having a good sense about what that is. They're very productive. It's important to not start with tenacity, but with discernment instead. So discerning what should I do and then doing it versus just doing stuff and then feeling regret later that it was the wrong thing. All right, here's you, JJ. GE, enthusiastic encourager. We've got a few of these in AIA. JJ, Emma, Beth, who's on our training and development team, and then Nick's wife, Kina. This one is a double whammy. They like to encourage people to act, and they're enthusiastic about it. Some of the most positive, affirming, and life-giving people. Great to be in a role where they keep things moving and keep feeling good about it and tell people what they're doing well. Relationship matters to them. They have a lot of energy. Enablement comes in with helping others and rallying more people to get involved. Downside, they can sometimes affirm too much when correction is needed. Their encouragement can lose some of its value. So if all you do is positivity and affirm in those times where truth is needed, it can be hard to hear, and then the encouragement even is less valuable when if it's like 90-10 sort of thing. So for time's sake, I'll kind of skip through some of these. We have assertive drivers, and then we've got two loyal finishers on the call. John and Randy. This is also Amy Dodd, who's at LTL, and Sally is on my team. So reliable, responsive to the needs. They have high standards. They don't need to be managed to keep going. So they're self-starters, self-motivated. Once they're in. Loyalty is strong. They often don't get the praise they deserve. Working with Randy, I could see that there's a lot of work Randy does behind the scenes just to keep things moving that probably doesn't go recognized. Downside, sometimes they over volunteer for things, can't let things go because they need to finish them, can be overcommitted and overwhelmed. Sometimes they're taken advantage of. They might get sick or quit before they tell you they have too much on their plate. That one's kind of interesting. So I'm gonna pause with that.